The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me as always my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I am doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
Tonight's episode is going to be cool, but it's going to be busy as hell. There's a lot of evidence in this episode. We've got two separate articles, and we've got a pretty long interview with a gentleman named Sergeant Carl Wolf, who claims to have actually seen photographs while he was working for the Air Force of an alien base on the moon. So that's the topic tonight, is an alien base on our moon. And I guess without further ado, let's get into the articles because there's a lot to go through here. So Nigel, could you read the first article, please?
Hello everyone. My name is Nigel. And I will be your AI narrator. Today's article comes from UFOsightingsfootage.uk. The headline is Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, tells Chief Medical Officer. They're here parked on the side of the crater. Neil Armstrong, astronaut, is changing the radio channel because he needs to report that a UFO is following their spaceship. But he needs to do it secretly. And he knows that the radio being used at the moment is not secure. The public will hear it. He needs to speak with the Chief Medical Officer. Fast. After watching the video below. Bottom, you should check out the credited sources bottom of post to get the full picture and the full details. So, because he knows that everyone is listening to every word that he is saying, and he knows it's been recorded, the first man to walk on another celestial body changes the radio channel. He is now in direct contact with the Chief Medical Officer at NASA, to which he tells him they're here. And they are parked on the edge of the crater. Of course, he later forgets all about it. Then he denies it. And then he says he said it. But we're mixing it up and it's not what he meant. This is mind-blowing stuff, and do you know who's giving us this information? It's a fellow astronaut. It's first-hand quality information, and it's a bombshell indeed. Aliens are spying on the United States astronauts. They are parked on the edge of the crater. This means that their vehicles are there. Their crafts could contain any number of extraterrestrial entities. This devastating information has come via none other than Buzz Aldrin. This is a decorated astronaut. A veteran NASA employee. A truly remarkable individual who has served his country in a selfless way. Since he was young. There's not 1 ounce of lies in his story. He is a decent person who knows what he heard. He knows what he saw, and he knows it was not the lack of oxygen making him have hallucinations. This is a bona fide, straight-up explanation of what he and Neil Armstrong saw on the moon. Just before the famous 1969 moon landing, NASA Mission Control had a few exchanges with astronaut Neil Armstrong on board the Columbia spacecraft, while they were headed towards the lunar surface. Seriously though, guys, here is what was basically said between them. On the third day of the mission, the Apollo crew checked in with Houston to ask about a mystery object. They say that was floating through space. Apollo 11 audio transcripts show Mr. Armstrong said, "Do you have any idea where the SIVB is with respect to us?" The SIVB was the third stage of the Saturn V rocket used to reach the moon. and has by that point already jettisoned from the Apollo 11 command and service modules. Mission Control then replied, Apollo 11. Houston. The SIVB is about 6,000 nautical miles from you now. Over. Many years later, Buzz Aldrin was in a TV interview. And do not forget that this is many years later. So he has had a long time to perfect the plausibility of all the things he has said since 1969. And the years after that. This is probably his most famous backtracking of anyone I have ever heard say. Because the astronauts did not know what they were looking at the time. Mr. Aldrin admitted the object could be described as unidentified. On a technicality. So, all I know is that when someone is being smug, or being arrogant, and basically saying that they did not say whatever you thought they said, and that we have twisted what he said, it is usually just to cover their tracks legally. Or maybe because someone at NASA said to him, put the record straight. Here are the statements by the former astronauts. Professor. What really happened out of Apollo 11? Buzz Aldrin. An amazing thing. Even though we have always known of this possibility. The fact is that they, aliens, have ordered us to turn away. Professor. What do you mean, warned to move away? Buzz Aldrin. I cannot go into details. There are structures on the moon. And not ours. I can only say that their ships were far superior to ours. Both in size and technology. Wow, if you were big. And menacing. Professor. But NASA also sent to the moon missions after Apollo 11. Buzz Aldrin. Naturally. NASA had already announced at that time. And could not risk panic on Earth. According to the American ufologist Vladimir Azasa. Neil Armstrong said to Mission Control that two large unknown objects were watching him and Aldrin after landing on the moon. But this message was never heard by the public. Because NASA censored it. But a 2006 video interview made by astronaut Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. It has analyzed the footage of the meeting between the Apollo 11 and the UFO. This was just one of many encounters with aliens. During the journey to the moon. Imagine being ordered away from another celestial body by an extraterrestrial entity because you're too close. Also imagine seeing a UFO following your spaceship. And you cannot, in your own mind, tell Mission Control for fear of what might happen next. And that is the end of the article.
All right, thank you, Nigel. And if you would, could you please read the second article?
This article comes from InfinityExplorers.com. The headline is, Former CIA pilot John Lear. There are millions of aliens living on the moon. It was written by Anj Srivastava. It was published March 25, 2018. The former CIA pilot John Lear gave an interview that has completely surprised the world. Lear has declared controversial information, such as names, details, and the range of 250 million humanoid aliens that, according to him, live on the moon. As if that were not enough. Lear has also reported that below the surface of the moon, there are urban areas where races of grey extraterrestrials live. According to the former CIA pilot. In these underground facilities, there are laboratories where genetic experiments are carried out. John Lear is a well-known and controversial character in the UFO community. In the 80s and 90s, he gave revelations referring to top-secret information about extraterrestrial activity. At that time Lear said, in 1953, an alien ship crashed and captured an extraterrestrial we called EBE-3, which then helped the US government to build some spacecraft with extraterrestrial technology. In 1962 we had vehicles that could not go faster than the speed of light. Like alien vehicles. But fast enough to reach the moon in 60 minutes. and a few hours to go to Mars. The first flight to Mars took place in 1966. Even on the Red Planet there are around 600 million alien beings. And some human colonies. According to Lear. NASA has edited the photographs taken by Apollo missions 8, 10, and 11 to prevent some secrets of the moon from being revealed. These photographs were published in 1971 in the NASA book SB2-46. Despite the editing of images, it is still possible to see a city, a spatial base, pipes, roads, vegetation, air, atmosphere, 66% of gravity compared to Earth, lights, mining operations, and a nuclear reactor. To do this, extraterrestrial collaboration was needed, since many buildings on the moon were already there before the operations began. This has been done for the last 40 years. John's father had been involved in anti-gravity technology programs in the mid-1950s. A completely secret technology today. According to Lear, everything we know about the moon is a government sham, with the specific objective of hiding its extraterrestrial activities and programs. He also says that the government has hidden the fact that there are many planets in the universe like Earth. Lear added, "I cannot prove it, or I would already be dead. I cannot show you an image of the USS Enterprise up there now. It is precisely what makes sense to know the technology obtained after the US government. I have injected billions or trillions of dollars into all of Tesla's investigations. And that is not all." Lear also gave another statement, which may be the most surprising of all. Lear said that our planet is actually a planetary prison, and serves as a prison institution where prisoners must reach a higher level of consciousness. Surprising statements like the previous ones logically need evidence. Unfortunately, Lear has no way to prove it. And as he says, if he had them he would already be dead. We are aware that other researchers who have come close to the truth have ended their days in strange ways. Although these stories sound like fantasy, we cannot rule them out. First world governments carry out secret projects, invest in advanced technology, and have great secrets that they refuse to declassify. Little by little, we will know the truth. And the truth is more fascinating than fiction. And that is the end of the article.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do now is we're going to play the interview. Now, this interview is around 20 minutes, and you will hear from Sergeant Carl Wolf himself, in his own words, exactly what he saw and exactly what was going on. So we're going to go to that now.
I was in the United States Air Force from January 18th, 1964 until October 18th, 1968. I got out of the Air Force 4 months early to go back to school, basically. When I left, my rank was sergeant. I had a top secret crypto security clearance. I had worked with Tactical Air Command in Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, the 44th Reconnaissance. They were working with the U-2 planes, the spy satellite photography before anyone knew we had it at that point in time. No one knew that we were doing spy photography, spy satellite photography. Of course, no one knew we had the U-2 program operating, or what the capabilities of that program were. We also did gun camera and reconnaissance film from C-130s, all sorts of aircraft that were going into combat situations. We processed the film for that. It was 1965. I believe it was about June or July of 1965, sometime in that time frame. My boss came to me. I was working in a color lab at that time. I was a technician, photographic technician, with a background in electronics. I'd been trained in electronic photographic repair. At in Colorado at Lowry Air Force Base. Actually, the school was a year long. The organization that I was in was a brand new installation. It was put in place to facilitate the escalation of the Vietnam War. So we were in a new facility. I had come there in January of 1965 to start that facility up. We installed all the equipment. There were everything from printing presses. We were doing map making as well. We were also, one of the things we were involved in was doing automatic terrain sensing. We had simulators that did terrain. You put a huge map in the facility, in the simulator, a terrain map, and you flew a camera over that and did a recording of the terrain, and then they installed that film in a plane, and the plane could then fly in under radar. It was called ATRAN, and no one knew we had that capability at the time as well. So we were installing all of that equipment. At any rate, I was in a color lab one day when my boss, Staff Sergeant Taylor, came over to me and said that they were having a problem with some equipment on the base, and it was the first lunar orbiter program, where they had a mission to pretty much locate the first landing sites for the 1969 lunar mission for the astronauts. So at any rate, he said they were having some problem with equipment over there. It was a similar equipment that we had. It was computerized contact printing equipment. And he wanted to know if I would go over and take a look at it. And he said to me, it's an NSA facility. And at the time, I didn't know what NSA was. I was pretty naive, and I thought he said NASA. So in my mind, for a long time, I thought it was a NASA facility that I'd gone to. But I remembered him saying NSA and converting it in my own mind to NASA.
And for viewers, the NSA is? It's
the National Security Agency. And I didn't know much about the National Security Agency until probably 10 or 15 years ago. Now the interesting thing, when my boss came to me at that point in time, I only had a top secret security clearance. I didn't get my crypto security clearance for a few more weeks. It takes years to get a high-level security clearance like that, and they start that when you're in school. And only the honor graduates from these schools are the people who get the high-level security clearances. They also get to choose their duty assignment, which is really quite nice. It just was a fluke. I just happened to be well prepared for what I was doing when I went to school.
And how did you get to be in a position where you actually were to deal with the material we are about to discuss?
I was asked to go over to this facility on Langley Air Force Base where the NSA was bringing in the information from the lunar orbiter. And so I packed up some tools. I went over. I went into the facility. As I approached the facility, it was very lightly guarded. I mean, the base was under high security at any rate. I was surprised that there wasn't a higher level of security outside of the facility as I look back on it later. I went into the facility. I gave them my low-level security badge. They gave me a higher-level security badge. A couple of officers took me into this hangar. It was a very large hangar. As I walked in, there were people from other countries, a lot of foreign people from other countries in civilian clothes, with interpreters with them, with security badges hanging around their neck. And the first thing I thought to myself, if this is NASA, what are all these foreigners doing here? What are all these people from other countries speaking other language? Didn't make any sense to me. And I was really quite impressed with that. It just didn't grok. I was, what are all of these people doing here? And they were very quiet, very reserved, and there was a very peculiar pall hanging over them. They had a very concerned demeanor. Okay, so they took me into this laboratory. I took a look at the equipment. There was an airman second class in there. I was an airman second class as well. He turned the equipment on and put it through its paces. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. I saw what was going on with it. I said, I need to do some troubleshooting on it. It had little printed circuit boards in it with discrete components at that time. It was before we had integrated circuits. And I said to him, we'll have to take this thing out of the lab if we're going to work on it. We can't work on it in here in the darkroom environment. So he called someone to get some people to come in and move it. It was about the size of a small apartment refrigerator. It wasn't something you could easily move. So everyone left the facility, left the darkroom, except this airman second class and myself. And we're in waiting for someone to come to remove this piece of equipment. So while I'm in there, I said to him, and I'm really fascinated with this process, how did they get the images from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory here? And he went through the whole process describing how the various radio telescopes around the world were linked and they telemetered the data into Langley Field. And at the time, I didn't know what the real purpose of this darkroom and this operation in this facility was. I thought this was where they were bringing the data in and then releasing the images to the public. I had no idea that there were other issues involved in this facility. So he starts telling me all of this information, and I knew that what we were doing was classified anyway, and that he could only share a certain level of what he was doing with me because of the compartmentalized nature of our jobs. At any rate, he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings. There were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And of course, here it is 30 some years later, and we still haven't heard about it. But at the time, I had been given about 30 of these photographs. They weren't photographs with artifacts in them, but they were photographs from that contact printer. I had some of them autographed by Dr. Colley, who was the head of the project at that time. And when I left San Francisco a few years ago, I actually sold them all in a yard sale because I was tired of carrying them around. And I may have a couple of them filed away someplace, but it was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. What was really interesting is I'm not sure what the resolution on those photographs were, but I know that we could discern from the satellite photography we were doing at our installation, you could read the license number off a car at that point in time. So I know we had that level of technology available. Whether or not it was on that lunar orbiter, I don't know. And this also always brings to question, in my mind, why we're getting such low resolution on photographs that we receive from Mars and any of these other missions. The resolution of these photographs is very low, when we've had since the early 60s a capability of much higher resolution. So I'm not sure what that's all about. That question always comes up in my mind. If I compare it to what I'm seeing now, because I do have photographs that have artifacts in them that are similar to what I saw, they're massive. Some of the structures are, half a mile in size. So they're huge structures. Yeah, I mean, and they're all different size structures in different photographs. You would have to have an above top secret security clearance, which generally would be cryptologic or above. In my case, I ultimately did have a cryptologic security clearance, and when I did have that clearance, I had access to all of the imagery from the U-2s, from the satellite photography. I had access to everything we were doing. Now, the thing that was interesting about my job as an electronics technician, I got to go into every area of the facility. I got to go into the war room at SAC, Strategic Air Command, and did maintenance on equipment there. So I would see a lot of data that people generally wouldn't see with my rank. Normally you would go into your job, you'd do your one little task. If you were a photographic interpreter, that's all you did. You didn't discuss what you did with anyone else. If you worked on U2 imagery, you worked on U2 imagery. If you worked on satellite imagery, you worked on satellite imagery. But you didn't discuss your job with anyone else. And you only did your task. If you were a photographic processor, you only processed the images. You were not allowed to discuss what you saw in those images with anyone else. We were briefed extensively about what this compartmentalization looked like. You didn't have conversations about what you were doing. So for me, I got to go into all these different areas and see what each of these people were doing, and some of them did share what they were doing. They would have photographs of the missile emplacements above their desk that they'd discovered, or they'd have photographs of the missiles on the decks of the Russian aircraft carriers, or I'd see various fresh spoil from a satellite photography around a missile emplacement in the Sinai Peninsula, as an example. We had in one room in our organization, we had a map of the Sinai Peninsula at that time that was made up from satellite photography. It was a mosaic, and it was 60 feet high and 60 feet wide. It was massive with great detail. So, I mean, it was fascinating. And I saw vehicles, and I saw vehicles on these satellite photography that you could read the license plate on. They actually showed me that, so I know that was something that was real. At any rate, getting back to the compartmentalization, I had access to lots of different areas only because I was a technician moving from area to area. The only other person that would have had that kind of access would have been an officer with a high-level security clearance that had a need to know. Bottom line, if you didn't have a need to know, there wasn't any reason to discuss what you knew with anyone else. And even if someone asked, if they didn't have a need to know and they didn't have a security clearance, you couldn't discuss it with them. Everyone wears a security badge with a specific color, and you know that color represents a specific level of security clearance. And as you move from area to area within an organization, you get into higher and higher levels of secure area. You'll go through a gate, you go into a vault, you exchange your badge for another badge of a higher level of security. You're briefed on your job as to what your level of conversation can be with another person. I was told, don't ask, don't discuss, just go in and fix the equipment. We'd sit down with a security officer, and he would review what your activities were, what you were doing, what you were allowed to do, They didn't ask you what you'd seen. They knew what I was seeing because they knew what I had access to. I was told to be very cautious when I was off base. I was told not to drink. I was told not to get intoxicated. I was told not to do drugs. I was told to be very cautious of people striking up a friendship with me because there were people who were gathering this sort of information. There was a lot of espionage around the base, military espionage, or foreign espionage. You can cut that one out. At any rate, I was told, don't let anyone take my photograph. Be very cautious about where I traveled, when I traveled. I knew that I couldn't go any place for at least 5 years without telling the State Department where I was after I left the military. Anytime I traveled, I had to notify and get permission to travel any place I traveled at that point in time in the United States. They had to know where I was all the time. We were told that when we traveled over a foreign area, as an example, if we went to Vietnam, there was always someone there with us, with a gun, ready to annihilate us, basically, if we should fall into the hands of the enemy. They didn't want the enemy to get us. We would be killed instead. So we knew we were operating under these sort of conditions, that your life was in jeopardy all the time should you fall into the wrong hands. So we were aware of that. I was told when I left that I would be investigated on a regular basis to make sure that I wasn't involved in any peculiar activities that didn't suit the government's needs. My security clearance expired in, I believe it was either October or January of 1998. And it was about 1998 that I actually, after my security clearance expired, I discussed what I had seen with my sister because she was interested in the phenomena. I read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. In the book, he said a lot of fantastic things. And he also said, near the end of the book, that there was a base on the backside of the moon. And when he said that, I said, aha. So I began to believe that everything he was saying was true. And he was saying a lot of really profound things about the crash in Roswell and alien technology and whatever, and how it had been mainstreamed through the Office of Foreign Technology by himself. So I knew that he was probably telling the truth. It just said to me, this guy's telling the truth, because I've had this experience and I know it's real. Yeah, it was Edgar Mitchell. He said, come forward, and I said, okay, it's time to start stepping out with this information. Because I was a little irritated, that the government had been lying about all of this for years and covering it up. And I felt it was time to get beyond that. There's a lot more weight to this than I realized, a lot more cover-up than I realized. Yeah, a lot more deception than I realized was going on. Well, some of the shapes, as I said, some of the buildings were very tall, thin structures. I don't know how tall they were, but they must be very tall.
Did you see profile shots of them?
I saw
angular shots with
shadows. They were angular shots with shadows. There were spherical and domed buildings, that were very large. They must be, half a mile in scale, because they were in relationship to the scale of the photograph. They stood out very clearly. They were large objects. It's interesting because I tried to relate them in my own mind to structures here on Earth, and they don't compare to anything that you see here in scale and structure. They're similar to a degree. I try to relate them to metal structures, and I couldn't see a metal definition. They're more like a stone structure, but a fabricated stone. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. Some of them were round. Some of them looked like a Quonset hut, with a domed kind of, like a greenhouse.
And all of these buildings were clustered together centrally?
The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. Mm-hmm. There was one building that had a dish-like shape to it, but it was very large. It looked like a radar dish, but it was a building. It could have been a radar dish. There was another building near it with a truncated top, with an angular top that was truncated. I didn't want to look at it any longer than that because I felt that my life was in jeopardy. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would love to have looked at it longer. I would have loved to have had copies. I would love to have, said more about it or discussed it more, but I knew I couldn't. And I knew that young fellow who was sharing this was really, really overstepping his bounds at that point. I felt that he just needed somebody to talk to. He hadn't discussed it, couldn't discuss it. And he wasn't doing it for any ulterior motive other than the fact that I think he had the weight of this thing on him and it was distressing to him.
Okay, so there's all the evidence we got here. We got 2 articles and we got an interview with Sergeant Carl Wolf where he tells you himself from his own mouth what he saw. Now there's a lot to unpack here because you have a gentleman that worked for the Air Force whose whole job was to deal with these photographs or photographs like these. And you heard out of his own mouth what he saw. In one of the articles you had statements from Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong about how when they went to the moon, they saw an alien craft there and they saw aliens there and that they were watching them. And I mean, you don't get much better of a source than that from 2 very well-respected and trustworthy people who were actually there. Then the 3rd article, you have a lot going on in that article with the CIA agent. There's a lot there. I mean, he's talking about 250 million aliens living on the moon. That is just an absolutely insane number. That's a hell of a lot of aliens, man. 250 million, that's close to the population of the United States. The United States has like 300 and some million people in it. So we're talking about close to the population of the United States worth of aliens living on the moon. He's also talking in that article about there being a whole underground urban area where all the Greys live underground. And they have laboratories there where they're doing genetic testing and stuff on human beings and all kinds of crazy stuff. He's talking about that there. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and I definitely want to get Old Boy's opinion on it too, is when he talks about in the article that the Earth is actually a planetary prison. And it serves as a prison where the prisoners, which would be us, must reach a higher level of consciousness before we are allowed to leave. Now that's kind of interesting to me because that kind of goes along with some of the religious beliefs of people who believe in like reincarnation and stuff like that. A lot of people believe that you keep coming back here until you get it right. So whatever lessons you need to learn, whatever things that you need to perfect here on Earth, you will come over and over and over again to Earth in order to work on those things and finally learn the lessons and finally reach a certain level of enlightenment, let's say. So that is a belief that is actually held by a pretty substantial amount of people on the planet. And it's interesting to hear him say that the Earth is actually a planetary prison. And the prisoners must reach a higher level of consciousness in order to leave. Now, I don't know what form leaving is. I don't know if that's when you die and then once you've reached that point, you just die. Or maybe if that's what abductions are, is once somebody reaches that level, they come get them and take them out of here and put them someplace else, whether there's another planet that serves for the next stage of enlightenment or what, I don't know. But I just thought it was a very interesting concept, and it's something that I would definitely like to get Old Boy's opinion on and find out what he thinks about it, because it's always interesting when we have these kind of statements made by people, and it correlates with something else that's already existing, like a major world religion or old folklore, old legends, whatever. Whenever there's a correlation between something somebody is saying today and beliefs that have been held, or something that was written on a tablet 1,000,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever, right? Way back in the past, or if it's something that a bunch of people believe now. It's always interesting when those two things correlate. And it kind of makes you wonder a little bit, is there something to that? I'm not saying the Earth is a planetary prison. I think that idea is kind of nuts if you want to know the truth. But it is very interesting that you have that correlation with reincarnation and the beliefs that are held by some cultures that you have to continually come back and keep working on the same things until you get them right. There's also beliefs that that's kind of what the afterlife is as well for some people. That when they're here as ghosts, it's because they have unresolved issues. And the only way that they can move on and go on to the next place is if they are able to deal with those issues that they had in life. So they spend a lot of time in the afterlife trying to come to terms with, or to cope with, or reach some sort of either enlightenment or some sort of sense of being okay with whatever happened in life. So they have to reach that level before they can move on. And it's kind of interesting because there's a correlation there as well to what this gentleman is saying. Now, I don't know if that's what he meant by what he said, or if he means literally it is a prison that's guarded by aliens that they won't let you leave if you don't reach the next level of consciousness. And that's something we've talked about on this show as well, the fact that we don't even understand why aliens would want anything to do with us in the first place, because we're kind of the bad boys of the block. You know, we're absolutely nuts. Human beings are. We're crazy. We're violent. We're unpredictable. We're untrustworthy. We are just nuts. And any self-respecting alien with any sense would definitely just take a wide berth around Earth. They wouldn't even bother with us. If they were smart, they would just turn left at Albuquerque, as Bugs Bunny used to say, and get the hell out of Dodge and completely forget about this planet. Because we're likely to... Here's what would happen. If tomorrow they said, okay, aliens are real, and here they are. And they introduced us to them. And they've been living with us this whole time, right? If that was to happen, and it became commonplace for aliens to be hanging out with us, I tell you, it would not take not even a month. I guarantee you this scenario would play out. Somewhere, somebody would take one of these aliens out to a bar with them, get them drunk, beat the hell out of them, steal their spaceship, and crash it into something. I guarantee you that would happen, because that's the way we are as people. We are just untrustworthy and nuts. We always do the worst possible thing. We are capable of great love and great goodness, but we are also capable of unspeakable evil. And I think it would only be a matter of time before the aliens would be like, what the hell are we doing here? Let's get the hell out of here. These guys are crazy. So, I mean, that's my opinion on it. So what I want to do now is I'm going to throw over to Old Boy. I want to get his opinion on the whole prison planet theory, because that to me is very interesting. And also just what he thought of the interviews and the articles and all that. So Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. I'll talk real quick because we don't have much time. Because of the recordings and the interview and stuff was very long, guys. Do I believe there's 250 million people on the moon? People, aliens, whatever you want to call them. No, I don't know. I believe there is aliens on the moon and everywhere in other planets. 250 is a lot, but why would certain people who are in the government and in general put themselves out like that? I don't know, man. It could be possible because there's been so many people saying that there's bases on the moon, all kinds of stuff. So I wouldn't put it past us that we know this, and I don't know if it's true or fake, and with the Greys being there, I don't know, man. It could be possible. But now with the whole coming back thing, that is a religion. Buddhists and a lot of people who are spiritual believe that you keep coming here till you get it right. I kind of believe that to a point. And maybe this might be a prison. Maybe that what we think as aliens and angels and demons these are what keeps sending us back is till we get it right. And then once you get it right, you just go where you're supposed to go, enlightenment or lights or whatever you want to call it, into the universe. Now, if you were a bad person, what your hell is, like you ever see like there's angels and demons and people are getting attacked by ghosts, but there's some ghosts to tell you stuff to make you get to another, to help you. And then there's some that attack you. Well, maybe, and this is just a theory while he was talking, this is great, he brought this up, is maybe that first time you came here, you were a bad person. So that bad entity attacks the new you, like you're a new person. And then you have other ghosts that was you, and it tries to help you. So you have bad and good, but you've came here before, but your bad entity stays here and it attacks you and it can kill you. When you're good, it can help you through things and tells you stuff. And then sometimes we think it's your family member when it really was you. It was you. Because you ever notice that sometimes you're like, you'll meet people like you knew you've been friends with them before in another time, or you've been somewhere, like I've been here. I know this place. It feels comfortable. I've never been there before in my life, in this life. How do we know that's not how it is? I'm not saying it is, or I believe that. I'm just saying it's a theory. How do we know that once you get out of here, this might be a prison? Because think about it, we go through all these crazy things, and like James was saying, we are absolutely stupid when he was talking about the alien things. That would really happen. Somebody would steal their ship and do something stupid. That's just how we are. We do that with everything. It would take it less than a month. I'd say about a week or less. Hey, let's go get the Moon Man drunk. Yeah. Watch what happens on that one. So I just wanted to say that one real quick because I thought it was kind of funny. He's really pretty much right. We would end up finding some way of messing that up. But yes, maybe that's what happens. Maybe we keep getting sent here, and you get sent as sometimes a woman, sometimes a man. It could be vice versa. You don't know. And then maybe these entities that attack some of us all the time was bad, a bad us, and then there's a good us at one time. So that's why we have these ghosts and stuff. I'm just throwing out a theory, guys. I don't say I believe that part of it. I'm just throwing out theories because it's always good to have different opinions. So maybe that's what happens. That maybe we're stuck on this world, and until we get it right, and we get sent wherever we're going to go. The universe, or we get turned into these moon men. Maybe these moon men are not really moon men. Maybe they are spiritual beings. They're not real. We just think they're alien because that's what they're extraterrestrial, but they're really just a part of the universe. Who says they're alien? Maybe they're the beings that we're talking about all the time. And then they control what happens to us. I'm just throwing that out. I don't know if I believe that, or I'm not saying I 100% do, but I don't know. There's just some stuff that I know that I was from somewhere another time. And a couple of them. And then I remember things and dreams, and I remember doing things, and when I go to certain places, I know I've been there before, and I've never been there before again in my life. It's like deja vu. But there you go, James. I'm trying to cut it short because we don't have so much time. So there's my opinion, brother.
Another thing that I can tell you from the article that is absolutely true is they talk about NASA censoring some of the footage from the moon so that you would not see the aliens that are there. I personally have seen footage that contained alien craft, not from the moon. I've seen it from right in our Earth orbit, right outside of our orbit, right near Earth in space. I've seen that footage. I've seen the raw footage, and I have seen the footage that got released to the public. Exact same piece of footage, except for the public version had been edited to where you do no longer see those craft flying around in the outer atmosphere. So I can tell you 100% that is fact. Now, did they censor the moon footage? I couldn't tell you for sure on that. I didn't see that. But I myself have seen footage of alien craft flying in our outer atmosphere, and the footage that got released to the public did not have those craft in it that I saw. So I know that that happened. 100% I know it. So if they are willing to edit footage of our outer atmosphere to take alien craft out of that footage, it doesn't surprise me that they would do it on the moon as well. That is completely consistent with what I have seen and what I know to be what they do. Now, the other question we have to ask is, if there is an alien base on the moon, if we know that they are there, and we know, according to the gentleman in the CIA, we know that there are underground laboratories, we know how many are living there, everything. That would tell me that we have some sort of agreement with them. Our government does. We are working together in some fashion for us to have all that intel on them. That's what it would tell me. So that would be an interesting thing to learn in the future as well. And one more thing I will say before we go into shout-outs is I would like to do in the future a show just on reincarnation. Because to me, that is a fascinating subject, and I have a lot of interesting ideas and questions about that I would like to bring up. And I think that would make a really cool show. So sometime in the future, probably the near future, because it's going to be in my head and it's going to bug me until I do it, we'll probably do a show just on reincarnation. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it back over to Old Boy so we can do the shout-outs, and then we'll wrap up. Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you from Parax Radio for listening to us every Sunday and Tuesday nights. Thank you for following us. If you want to keep listening to the shows, go ahead and subscribe to James Hershey's YouTube page. If you want any merchandise, he'll tell you where to go. Shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We're trying to do a lot of different stuff now, guys. It's new, and it's almost fall, so Halloween's coming, so we can probably do some Halloween shows real quick. So that being said, I hope you guys have a good evening. Misfits, Sugar Ladies, Monster Hunters, and Demon Lovers, I love you and have a great night. Blessed be.
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. That's where all the videos are. You've got over 200 episodes of Paranormal News now. You've got over 200 episodes of Staring into the Abyss. You've got every episode of Tales from the Abyss, East Coast, and Tales from the Abyss, West Coast, that we did. There are tons and tons and tons of interesting videos there. It's all 100% free. Please go subscribe and just enjoy it. In the description box of those videos on the channel, the newer videos, will be the link to the merchandise store. That's where you can get everything. You can get all the shirts, and there's bumper stickers and towels and cups and all kinds of stuff. If you want merch and you want to support the show, go to the description box of the videos, and that right there at the top is where you can find the link to the merch store. Thank you guys for hanging out with us again tonight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all your love and all your support. We greatly appreciate you. Until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.